Wendell Ferreira over at A to Z Sports put up this article on Jonathan Gannon, and the title of the article, at least what he tweeted out here, Packers embrace unpredictably and a more versatile vision with Jonathan Gannon as defensive coordinator. And he goes on to tweet here what the Packers defensive scheme will look like with Jonathan Gannon. All right. So when we dive into it, and again, you guys make sure you go give this a retweet, a like, a click, all that good stuff. Wendell Ferreira starts the article off, and this is going to be a deep conversation. We're going to try to keep it very, very simple in this regard. Okay. But understand there's no way that Wendell Ferreira can explain Jonathan Gannon's defense in one single article. There's no way we can explain it on the podcast. It's very, very, very deep. People hear Jonathan Gannon and they think the big term. Let me put it this way, Jake. Remember when Jeff Hafley was hired, and the conversation went to we're playing bump and run man now, baby. We're playing man coverage. We're playing man coverage, and it didn't happen, right? The term that's getting thrown around right now is cover seven, right? It's going to be more than just a cover seven defense, okay? So here's what he writes in the article. The Green Bay Packers are moving to a new schematic world under defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. Matt LaFleur decided to hire the former Philadelphia Eagles DC and Arizona Cardinals head coach as the defensive coordinator to replace Jeff Hafley, and most likely that means going back to a 3-4 base, all right? But that's just a small part of what the defensive adjustments will entail. These days, teams play nickel packages around 70% of the time anyway. So the base only matters to a certain extent. The rest of the changes are much more intriguing. This is what we talked about, right, Jacob? People say, oh, we don't have the dogs to run a 34. If you're only going to be in your base defense 30% of the time or less, you better not be prioritizing that aspect of your defense. You better be keying in on making your nickel defense better. And that's why you'll notice that the tier 2 positions of importance, you're not going to find a third stack backer as a tier 2 position of importance, right? You're not going to find, I don't list it as you need to have 2 great edge defenders. You need to have a 3-tech and you need to have a great edge, right? One of each, because in your nickel, you can maximize your opportunity doing that as opposed to having 2 great edges and no interior pass rush, because they just fan that pass rush out, make sure they're single blocked in the middle, and they're good to go, right? So that 34 talk is way overblown. I love that he started his article with that. So he goes on to say, Cody Alexander from Match Quarters called Gannon's defense, quote, a unique system of hybrid fronts and college-style coverages. Gannon ran a Vic Fangio-style scheme in Philly, but he also worked under Mike Zimmer on the Minnesota Vikings and Matt Eberflus in the Indianapolis Colts. Pause, okay? With Matt Eberflus with the Indianapolis Colts, it was more of a cover 3 zone defense, okay? Mike Zimmer was a blitz-heavy coffee house, double A-gap, double barrel mug. He showed that a lot of times, all right? And then, of course, Fangio is quarters coverage. So you're looking like you're probably going to get a meld of all 3 of those. That's great news. You want to stay fresh in your ideas. You want to be flexible and be able to adjust from week to week, depending on the opponent that you're playing, okay? He goes on to say the difference from Hafley to Gannon. In addition to running a 4-3 base, Hafley used primarily cover 3 and cover 2 in an ideal world in this order. I'm a big fan of that. You guys know. I love cover 3, cover 2, cover 6, all that, right? Hafley leaned on disguised pressures without the defensive talent up front back in 2024, which worked and showed his adaptability, but it's not what he likes to do. It is what Gannon likes to do, however. Disguised pressures and coverages were a big part of Gannon's identity with the Cardinals. You can reasonably argue that the results weren't any good, but the defensive talent had obvious deficiencies and went to a rebuild in 2025. Gannon will prioritize 5-man fronts and a heavy usage of quarters coverage. Nobody in the entire league had a higher rate of cover 4 in 2025. Gannon runs a decent share of man coverage when needed, and cover 1 is his preferred coverage when he does that. Well, guess what? That was the same preferred man coverage that Jeff Hafley ran, was cover 1 man. I think he ran 0% of cover 2 man, 2 man under, right? He doesn't rely on blitzes too much, but disguises and stunts tend to be a big part of his weekly plan, which bodes well for the Packers disrupting defensive line personnel. Love Micah Parsons on stunts. Sometimes it can free him up, give him leverage even in those double team situations. Now, adaptability. In the real world, though, coaches have to adapt during this time. With the Eagles and Cardinals, Gannon emphasized his priority of adjusting his scheme to the players at his disposal. The first thing is we've got to figure out what our players can do, and then we've got to put them in those situations as much as possible to utilize their strengths, Gannon once said. the main thing for us is it's not what we play, it's how we play. The Packers have a special circumstance with Micah Parsons coming off the edge and making some type of transition from a 4-3 defense to a 34 defense. Linebackers, which seems to fit well with what he does. So let's pause right there. Up to this point, Jacob, you see, even though we're shifting to a 34, we're going to be in the nickel the majority of the time. It's sounding like you're going to see a lot more quarters coverage and cover one man as opposed to cover 3, cover 2, and probably cover 6. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just as you were literally saying that sentence, it's funny because Soder said it sounds like Gannon can match the D to match the player's strengths. That was something I think that we really loved about Halfley as well. And like you just mentioned, kind of those 3 different types of systems that he got the shadow of some pretty good coaches, I would argue, is going to be great. Like you said, you can't do the same thing in the NFL. Stands for not for long for many different reasons. And one of them is because players, coaches, teams are going to adapt to what you're doing. So it's nice to know a guy can be versatile.
Absolutely. We got a super chat here from R.R. Smith. Thank you so much, Smith. Appreciate you. Salute, becoming more of a fan every day, and I agree with this sentiment. Keep your, quote, dirty. I want confident. Stop them, but then get the ball back to Love. Less Artest and more Tim Duncan's rings. Thank you. That's very – I don't like basketball today. Today's basketball, I grew up in the 90s, so I was spoiled rotten with the best basketball in the history of the world. But that is very well said. I understand the comparison there with Artest and Tim Duncan. Again, man, I could care less how tough we look. I want to win a damn ring. I want to win, like when you go back to what worked in 2010, let's just say defensively, right? Who was the anchor of that defense? To me, the anchor was B.J. Raji at nose, right? B.J. Raji is the child of 2 Pentecostal preachers. I think that's why he stepped away and just disappeared out of the limelight completely. I think he went to work with his parents. So he was one of the nicest guys on the face of the earth. But boy, oh boy, he played with good leverage, good pad level. He was kind of built with a low center of gravity. He never got washed out on those A-gap runs when he was taking on those double teams. They would play a true 2-gapper, right? Which means engage in the A-gap with both the guard and the center, and you walk them horizontally whichever way the run goes, right? That's a perfect example of someone who I didn't feel like was necessarily mean, and that's the guy in the trenches. Like, let me ask it this way. Who would you rather have, Jake, if you got one game to win? Who would you rather have at defensive tackle? Would you rather have Mike Daniels or would you rather have B.J. Raji?
Mr. Raji.
Same. And he was the nice guy, and Mike Daniels was the pissed off dude, right? So it is what it is. Thank you so much, R. Smith. Very well said. I completely agree with that. Thank you for the dono. It goes on to say in the article.
Sorry, real quick. Holmes does want to clarify. Says, to be clear, I was not promoting dirty or stupid players. I think maybe he meant, like I said, more gritty, smart, human meat missiles, if you will.
There you go. All right. Defensive personnel. There's one aspect in particular that's intriguing about the Packers, what the Packers have on defense. The Cardinals used a lot of 3 safety looks. Now, pause, time out. Go back 2 years ago. I said every year I try to find something, right? Something that I go, and this sparked because a listener emailed me. This was before we were on YouTube. A listener emailed me and said, Clayton, what's the one thing we're not thinking about going into this season that you caught from last year? And I told him, 2 years ago, I said RPO is taking over the league big time, right? It had really taken over the league. And then the next year I said duo. I think duo is something that's going to become a big part of what we do based off what we've seen here lately, right? Last year, what did I say? Across the league, 3 safety looks, 3 deep safety looks. I mean, literally 3 deep safeties. You remember me talking about this last offseason, Jacob? I said this is something there's a chance that this could start to take over, kind of like wide zone boot did, wide zone running, and then you had to go to the wide 9 looks up front and all that. This is where it kind of peaked at. Now, did it work? I don't know. Time will tell if he wants to do that in Green Bay. I'm going to tell you right now, though, if he comes out and he shows three deep safety looks, this fan base is going to lose their mind, because I remember when we had 2 deep safety looks consistently, and it's, why are we playing so far off the ball? It is going to be wild out here if that happens, man, for sure. So yeah, it goes on to say that, and then it says around 30% of the defensive snaps in 2025, he had 3 safety looks. That's perfectly suitable for the Packers personnel with Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, and Javon Bullard. See, I don't see it as Javon Bullard being a safety. I see him as a slot corner. And this is where you're kind of splitting hairs on the situation. Some people would look at that and go, oh, they're playing 3. To me, the safety position is when you play deeper than the cornerbacks, right? That's a safety position. So if you're truly going 3 safeties, no matter who's playing that safety position, it's still a safety. The player doesn't make the position. The position makes the player. right? So if you've got three guys lined up in that third level behind the corners and the linebackers, then that's a three safety look. If you got Bullard on the field and he's playing 6 yards off the ball while Carrington Valentine's playing 3 yards off the ball, I'm never going to consider Bullard a safety. And I'm not saying Wendell Ferreira is saying that in this article. I'm just simply saying it depends on what you call a safety. We're really, really splitting hairs here. We really are. So, but he did point out that, Bullard can play safety in a pinch. Jacob, we love Javon Bullard come out in the draft, right? I think we both agree now he is not a safety. He's a nickel corner. Do you agree with that? That's how I feel about it.
I do agree with that. And I think, like you said, we've kind of learned what he does and what he doesn't do best. And also, do you think that this is more of an incentive for the Packers to maybe bring back Zane Anderson, even though we've got like guys like Oladapo still that are kind of waiting in the wings as well? And we've had a lot of great young safety play, to be honest. And I think what we're lacking is that steadiness in the quarterback room. So it doesn't make sense for a number of reasons in my eyes to take Bullard away from that slot position and move him into a safety position that's already a little crowded.
Right. And here's the thing, too, that if we do go Oladapo, and I agree with you, I would rather see Oladapo back there rather than move Bullard out of the slot. Now, maybe they change that. They put Nate Hobbs in the slot. They go get a free agent cornerback. And now all of a sudden they do have Bullard playing a three safety look. The issue, though, is if you have him back there with three, let's say you bring in Oladapo. So you got a three safety look with Oladapo, McKinney, and Evan Williams. And then you got, still Javon Bullard in the slot. Well, if you've got two outside corners, guess what? You're no longer running a nickel, you're running a dime. So if the argument is that he wants to run dime more than nickel, I disagree with that to a certain extent, unless it's a pass-heavy opponent that you're playing that week, right? If you got someone that stays in, let me put it this way. One thing that I like to, and you can do this a little bit more in high school and college, I believe, although college has gone to nickel defenses way more often. If it's a run situation and they come out in 11 personnel and we're playing zone, whether it's spot drop or some kind of match where you're tightening in windows down the seam, I wouldn't be opposed to going to a 4-3 with athletic linebackers against 11 personnel, because their bread and butter is going to come from the run. Force them to pass on first down. Force them to do it, right? That way they can get them behind the sticks, as opposed to going in the opposite direction into dime personnel on defense. And now you're against 11. You got a dime defense stacked up against 11 personnel. Now they've got the hat count interior. They've got the advantage when it comes to running the ball, especially inside, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, there's pros and cons to all this, obviously, right? So it goes on to say here, the Packers will have a lot to figure out, and defensive personnel changes are realistic, but the scheme will inevitably look different, and LaFleur isn't shying away from a new reality even after two relatively successful seasons with Hafley at the helm. And again, the question becomes, do you promote from within, Jacob, or do you go outside the building? The pros of promoting from within is the scheme can stay the same, and now you can add another layer, another wrinkle, and these guys are comfortable doing that. If you go outside of the building, you may get a better coach, a better defensive mind, but now you change the schemes to a certain extent, and now all of a sudden these players have got to adjust. If they adapt and they adjust well to what Gannon's doing, and it's why I have a lot of hope, because like Wendell said in the article, Gannon, his main priority is to put guys in position to do what they do well. That's great, because that means he's going to give a little bit with his scheme, right? I think it's going to be a great move. Now, will they be a top 10 defense? Only time will tell. I know this, that when a new defense takes over, that first year, you typically got the upper hand. Joe Barry had his best year his first year, right? Jeff Hafley had his best year his first year. And it typically, year two, these teams kind of adjust, and now you've got to make the adjustment to their adjustment. So it's kind of, the stars are kind of lining up here. If we fill a couple of these voids, these holes, and we don't go out with the youngest roster again, we add some veteran presence. I think with the addition of a new scheme that teams don't have a whole lot of tape on what we're going to do with Jonathan Gannon, with our personnel, you might have the perfect recipe going to run here, man. You may have it.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I'll be honest, when we had the Ganon announcement, I wasn't over the moon, but I think we were on earlier that day when you said if you had to pick one, you said if it makes sense to get just one coach that could get us going right away, you said Gannon. So once the pick was made, it kind of soothed me a little bit, because I was like, all right, let's do this. And like you said, now seeing the versatility that he's had in multiple different franchises with multiple different really, really good coaching staffs, knowing that he can, like you said, kind of tailor his playbook and his adjustments based on what these players, hopefully who he'll get to know, obviously who he'll get to know down the road. tailoring his scheme towards what they do well. I love that approach. And like you said, it's kind of a toss-up. I mean, there's not many coaches left in Green Bay, to be honest. They keep getting, every time you look, they're getting poached away. So he's obviously going to have to bring in some, I don't know if they're new guys, because, he's played a lot of places, so I'm sure he has a lot of connections. I'm excited. This is hope season, and I think that right now everything on paper looks good. I do want to get him some parts. I mean, think about if we could sign a Calais Campbell, get ourselves Linderbaum, draft a couple studs in the secondary room, and all of a sudden I feel like we are poised and ready, and that window's wide open.
Absolutely. And, there's a certain sense of, too, okay, I've got to earn this guy's respect. Maybe they had Halfley's respect. So now maybe you up it a little bit. Like, I got to be on my P's and Q's because someone else might take my job if they understand this scheme and they study harder than me. That was the thing about Tucker Kraft that really stood out, was Matt LaFleur saying his rookie year, leaving the facility and looking in that room and seeing Musgrave and Kraft still there, the last guys in the building studying the playbook, right? That's the type of stuff you're looking for. So if you've got a player that, I'm CB1, I'm okay, no, I'm untouchable, and then you got a young corner that you may draft here. Maybe it's an Igbinosin or someone like that out of the draft. Maybe it's some of these guys we like a D'Angelo Pons or a Chris Johnson out of Arizona State. Maybe it's an Abney. Maybe it's Cease. I think he's from South Carolina. One of these guys come in and they're hungrier, right? They want it more. And next thing you know, you look up and go, oh boy, this guy's on the bench because he didn't take it as serious. Those things matter for sure. So if you guys are watching this video back later, let us know in the comments, how do you feel about this new Gannon defense and everything we covered? Notice we didn't get into the details. We didn't talk about box and triangle and gaining a hat. We didn't talk about apex defenders. We didn't talk about mod. We didn't talk about if and then. We didn't talk about spot dropping, the difference between match principles, matching the 2 to the 3 or carrying the 2 to the 1. There's a lot of different things that come into play. Offenses will attack defenses based off of, and I learned this from Aaron Rodgers, how does the SAM lining up? You can look at the SAM and you look at the boundary safety, and it'll tell you 60% of the information you need to know on pre-snap what defense they're in. That's the hardest thing for them to disguise. It's their boundary safety positioning and their SAM positioning, because that guy's got to meet the run fit off the edge and so on and so forth. So we didn't even get into all that, but let us know in the comments, how do you feel about this change and what we did cover? And make sure you hit like, subscribe, click the bell icon so you catch all the live streams here moving forward. We greatly appreciate y'all.